Gully Slick Wake, everyone. So this is our jerky, really quick tutorial on the how-to. We are going to show you how to use some of the equipment, but we're not going to spend a very long time to do it from the beginning to the end. But hopefully that we cover, for the most part, the safety of preparing jerky at home. The biggest thing you want to control is to make sure that your meat is safe and that you're using some really good fresh meat. Even if it's frozen, whether it's bison, whether it's venison, whether it is squirrel, whether it is beef or chicken, you can do and use pretty much any type of meat to make jerky. Then one of the things that you want to kind of steer away from using is bear meat, because it is very, very, let's say, dirty. And so a lot of times you have to increase your nitrates to it, which means that you have to really increase that salt intake. So what we are going to be using and what's going to be in your kit is you are going to get a Junhenqua roast. And you could get a round roast, a rump roast. I'm not quite sure exactly what roast you're gonna get. Some may have a bone in it, some may not, and we'll kind of explain a little bit on how to cut those up. You're going to get a pound of the farm's ground beef. Actually, you're gonna get 2 pounds. And so I'm gonna look at our inventory, and if we have some Junhenqua ground beef, we'll add some of that in there as well. And the intent is for you to utilize these meats so that you have an understanding to prepare jerky, again, with you and your family when you are either out hunting and you're looking to harvest and make your own, or you have access to local beef, as we do here within our food system in Oneida. And so, because you know that it can get really costly. So we want to ensure and help you to look at those cost savings, and then again, to really look at our food system here and how to locally source if you're not harvesting yourself or hunting yourself. And so what we're gonna do is Joss is our student apprentice. She's here with us until May. She's gonna be then headed over to Durango, Colorado and hang out in the Four Corners area. She's gonna be a Skyhawk, woohoo, headed to Fort Lewis. So I'm super stoked. And so if you know me, I had some time at Fort Lewis, so I'm really stoked for her. So she is going to do a little demo on how to use the hamburger and the jerky gun. So in your kit, I talked about the meat, but you're also going to get different types of seasonings. And it could be, we have some Jamaican jerk rub, we have some fajita mix, we have some curry seasoning blends, some Thai seasonings. We got all kinds of different fun seasonings that you can try, as well as your average pepper seasoning and what is really common, like your teriyaki. So that one of these or a few of these will be in your kit for you to be able to use. Now, can you use your own and you're like, Jamie, I'm just not digging these spices. I actually want to use the Jamaican rub on some jerk chicken tacos. I'm totally going to be down with that. We just need you to share with us what you use so that we know then how to use this. And if you say, well, you know what, I want to actually do my own. I was thinking about this, and so I have an idea as to what seasonings. Absolutely, that is exactly the intent of what we want you to do, is we want you to really start thinking and that light bulb to go off. Because a lot of times we have all these bits and pieces of knowledge, but we're not quite sure how to put it together. So these type of activities allow us to connect those dots of what we already kind of know, and then take a little bit from everybody else. So you're also going to get a dehydrator. These will come back so that we are able to, again, we're building capacity here with our equipment so that we can have a lot of community members be able to do all kinds of different things in preserving foods at home. A lot of times we don't want to invest, especially if we don't think that we're going to use it. So for us here at the cannery, we really look at those type of situations, and then we build upon that so that you then are like, oh, I can go to the cannery and I can sign these out. And then there's a 3-day sign out for these. So we want to create the sustainability plan so that we have these items for years to come, so there's never a question. So when we are dealing with issues with food sourcing and we can't find certain foods that we like, but we have these equipments and we kind of think that we know how to do, that's really the intention then, is for us to really as I mentioned before, connect the dots and really be able to prepare these foods at home. Drying is one of the longest food preservation methods known to man. And a lot of times it was happened outside in heat and smoke. Of course, you've heard of smoking fish, meats, turkey in particular, because we all love those turkey drummies from Woodman's, our Maple Woods, that we put into our corn soup. So when I go back to the dehydrator, the dehydrator that we have available to use is one of these Nescos, and the heating element is on the top. Oh, but don't look, sneak peek as to some of the already prepared jerky that we have for you. So I will talk about the jerky in a little, or the dehydrator in a little bit, but right now what we're gonna have is, when I talked about the food safety of salmonella and E. coli and any sort of pathogen, microbial growth, we really got to be cognizant, really understanding what does that mean. And so we want to try to eliminate any sort of microbial growth, any sort of pathogen growth that could potentially make us sick. So foodborne illnesses, you've heard it if you've taken a food safety class, you definitely have heard foodborne illnesses. And the reasonings to wipe your hands and cross-contamination. When it comes to food, it's a little different. So we usually have a curing mix to it, which is some nitrates, and that's just another form of salt. And so they say, you know, can you have too much? Sure, just like anything, you can have too much. And so if you are dealing with any sort of high blood pressure, any sort of heart disease, you're probably looking to control your salt and your sodium intakes, right? So you really kind of want to make sure within your recipe or any sort of boxed ingredients, and then the recipes usually go by 1 pound per 1 packet, or 2 pounds per 1 packet. And we have some curing salt for you available. I'm actually going to measure out based on the amount of meats that you have, and we're going to measure those out for you so that you don't have to do that work. And that's really too because it came in bulk. So we'll take care of that on your own. But if you were to buy something similar to like this, say at Fleet Farm, Menards, Walmart, I'm sure you've come across, I mentioned Maple Woods, and I'm sure you've come across like jerky. Well, this box is not very helpful to open up. But you get a variety of different seasonings, and you usually will get that curing packet. And that's what's in here. And so this one happens to have mandarin teriyaki as a seasoning, pepperoni as a seasoning, sweet and spicy, inferno, and pepper, just to name a few. We're actually going to use the teriyaki for the hamburger jerky. So now what we're gonna get at is that, if you can come a little bit closer, we will show you the difference. Here's the curing, the nitrites, and then this is the seasonings of that jerky. So Joss is just gonna mix both of them up, and that's what you're gonna do at home. You're gonna really make sure that you mix up the seasonings and the nitrate, the curing salts. And then based on how much seasoning, again, it's gonna be based on your recipe. So for the boxed that I was kind of sharing with you, this has the parts to it. So 1 tablespoon of seasoning to maybe 2 tablespoons of curing salt to 1 or 2 pounds of meat. So you definitely need to make sure that if you're using a box seasoning that you're following that directions, because those curing agents that are in there, those ingredients are, they're ratioed accordingly to then the pounds of meat per the seasoning amounts that's in that box. So again, what we're gonna do then is we're gonna have Joss go ahead and dump your seasonings right into your ground beef. So this is the ground beef, so she's gonna get, this is the fun part. I'm gonna hook you guys up with some gloves as well. So she is really gonna get in there and make sure she mixes it all up, whether it's in a bowl, whether you're gonna do it in a Ziploc package. However you do it to get it really mixed is definitely key. So while she's doing that, I'm going to talk about this jerky gun right here. Y'all will be getting a jerky gun. Some of you might get jerky guns that are already that we've already used. And then some may get jerky guns that are still new into the package. So how you use it, and it's pretty universal for any gun, is it's like a caulk gun. So if you're ever familiar with, you know, doing any sort of edges at your home using a caulk gun, you bring this back, then it brings this part back. And then we'll explain why you need this part back in order to put your meat into there. So then Jocelyn is going to we're going to put these parts together first. So this one is a strip, and then you're going to have a circle one that's like pretty equivalent to like a Slim Jim. So we wanted to give you kind of all kinds of options on pretty much what you're used to, and then allow you to kind of have fun with it, of those things that you were like, oh, I wish, or could this happen, or if I cut it like this. Well, that's kind of the fun part about being able to do it at home, is that you don't have anybody looking over you. But I just want to really, really emphasize the food safety part of it. So go ahead, Jocelyn. So when I'm talking about food safety, in regards to, you're going to see the hamburger, obviously, and the hamburger has been processed. So it has been touched, it has been into a grinder, there's airflow in it. So the other curing part of the curing seasoning is that it prevents any sort of oxidation so that your meat doesn't turn gray. And it's very high in processed meat. So lunch meat, hot dogs, what is another? Bacon. And so does it cause cancer? Yeah, it does. High volumes, it absolutely does. Just pretty much almost everything does at this point. So now that she has that packed in, and these guns, any gun that you pretty much get, unless it's like a little mini one, fits 1 pound of hamburger in it very nicely. So you see that you're gonna have all kinds of air in there. That's okay. That is okay. So we're gonna grab this from her. And then she's gonna go ahead, when she can, put these together. And while she is doing that, I want to talk a little bit about the roast that you're going to get, because we're not going to do the cuts here. I just didn't want to go through so many roasts on the how-to, but I want to explain a little bit. And one of the things I want to explain a bit is the fat content. So you want to eliminate as much fat as you possibly can with the roast. And then the slices, how thick, you want them to be about 1/4 thick. You don't want them to be any fatter or any smaller, because then if they're any smaller, then they really dehydrate to even less than what you're gonna get. And any thicker is going to be an issue with your drying temps and the times. So you want to eliminate and cut off as much fat as you possibly can. And it also prevents it from getting rancid. So here are some that we were able to do last night for you, so you kind of know what to expect and what to look for. These are strips for the hamburger. These ones that got stuck in there, we patted them down, so don't do that. I would use a cutting board. We were just anxious to get it done, but I would use a cutting board or a flat surface if your strips are not pretty uniformed. And then here are pieces for the roast. So you can definitely see the difference. So here you can see where we were going too fast. So sometimes it's kind of nice when we make mistakes so that you can actually visually see these type of mistakes. Now, should we have gotten a lot of that fat off? We should. We should take as much as we possibly can out of there. you want your meat to be pliable. So that's the other thing I'm going to talk about a little bit more when we get done so I can show you. So here's another one where we kept some of the good fat on there. It's good fat, no doubt, but for us with dehydrating, we want to again take out as much as we possibly can. And I'll show you why here in a second. So again, here are the strips from the roast. Personally, I really like the roast jerky. But the hamburger jerky is just, it's so much fun to use that gun. All right, so what you want to do, your dry time is going to be no more than 14 hours. What we did is we had to leave it on all night long. So we started it, I think we got done around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and then we turned these on, and then we had to leave it. And then when we came in, about 8 o'clock, then I turned these off, and I knew that they were done, and I knew that they were probably going to be a little overdone. And so what happens is if you decide that you're like, well, I'm going to start this at night and let it go all night long, you really want to be cautious to not start it mid-afternoon and then go until like 10 or 9, because you're going to overdo it. And then what it's going to be like is it's going to almost be a little powdery when you're chewing into it. Josh will give you this. And when you cut the strips, you want them to be really pliable. So you can kind of already see some of the grease on there. So halfway into your dry time, you want to pat these down. You're going to see the fat come off of them, and you're going to want to pat them down. I mean, they're already dry, but you can already see the excess grease. And then in here, the drippings to it. So this is another reason why you want to try to eliminate as much fat as you can. You can't do that with the hamburger, unfortunately, but with the roast, you definitely can. So again, to make sure that it's going to be more, there's kind of 2 parts to this. You want to make sure that this dehydrator gets to 160 degrees. So if you're like, Jamie, I don't want to deal with the nitrites. I would rather do a very clean, a very organic recipe. What do you suggest as far as like a curing agent? And so what I would suggest for you to do is, one, you're probably not going to want to soak your roast or any of your hamburger into vinegar, but that would be an option. We did that once and it was very much like vinegar chips. They were good, just didn't really taste like jerky. So that's one option. But the other thing is that you may want to consider, and these are usually, I shouldn't say usually, these are USDA guidelines, is to look at cooking your meat either before for like up to 165 degrees, or when you get done is sticking it in the oven for 30 minutes for 165 degrees. I truly believe that you're going to be okay at 160 degrees for 14 hours without one, but then it does not store as long. So if you're not using any curing salt or any sort of curing agent, it's not going to store as long as you would if you did. And I'm talking from days to months. So that's the difference. So don't do so much if you're going to do more of a natural recipe, a natural marinade. The other thing I didn't mention is an overnight marinade. You absolutely can. So whether or not you're not going to use dry ingredients and you're going to use wet ingredients, or you're going to use dry ingredients but you want to marinate it overnight, yes, you can. I highly suggest that because it just gives you, added flavor. But make sure though that your meat is then refrigerated. You can't leave it overnight. So we're going to have Jocelyn show you a little bit about how fun this jerky gun is. There you go. So here's we're gonna reuse the trays because we can. And so as she's showing you, go ahead. Yeah, definitely go ahead. She's getting good. You're getting good at this, Joss. There you go. So you can make your strips as long as you'd like, but always consider about how you're going to store them and package them based on what size you should do. Now, can you refrigerate them after you get done? Yeah, absolutely. You absolutely can, and I would highly suggest that, especially if you're not going to use a curing salt. Again, it's all about food safety. All right, so you can see based on the remnants how much more she has. She didn't even quite fit 2 on there, so you're gonna get a good amount even out of 1 pound. That's kind of what's nice. And you can see that it doesn't completely shrivel to nothing. You get a good amount back. A lot of times when you're dehydrating other foods, especially berries, and you're doing like, let's say strawberries, and you're doing like 10 pounds, you get like an ounce back, right? So this particular activity, you're gonna get a good amount size-wise. And then she actually, she stopped at a good time. She didn't force it to go even more. She just stopped, and that works too. That's probably a really good best practice. And then remember, maybe half of your meat you're gonna want in strips, and then the other half you're gonna want in the circular, again, Slim Jim type. All right, these are really good. And so you're going to put these tray upon tray. I'll just take these trays just to show them. On trays, keep giving them to me. I talked a few times when we were doing apples about the difference of dehydrators. This dehydrator that you're going to use that we have available actually has the heating element on the top. So on one hand, these that I noticed when I opened them up yesterday are very user-friendly, especially if you have never used a dehydrator before, or you are just not very familiar. You might have used them a few times. It's just super duper easy. Usually it's not very complicated anyway, but this one, you'll see the knobs. And if you forget and you're like, what did Jamie tell me to, what temperature should I put the jerky on? Usually your dehydrators show you. You're all getting a brand new one, so I have not even opened them up. You will actually open them up, and there's a book in there as well, and it will also give you some more information or the same information in regards to how to prepare it, how to package, what are the things you should consider. So with this one, you never want to, again, is to do fruits and meats. You can do different types of fruits in one settings and different types of meats in one settings, but you never want to do fruits and meats, and that's, prevents cross-contamination. So if you are at home and you're like, okay, she said her suggestion is to not start this at night, but so I'm gonna start it like maybe around 11, right? So then I would check it like every 4 hours, and you may consider switching up your trays from the top to the bottom to the top. Again, that's because the heating element is on the top and it's going down, okay? If you have your own dehydrator, or if you're like, you know what? This is actually a piece of equipment that we're gonna use often, I would highly suggest you to get a heating element here rather than on the top, because then it's a consistent flow. I think we about covered it. So what I didn't, mention so much is like, how should you package? We will give you Ziploc bags as well to include into your kit. You can package in glass closures. I highly recommend that. We don't always have glass hanging around, or you might have excess glass and you don't even want to deal with plastic. I hear you on that. So just to recap too on the packaging is that whether or not you're going to refrigerate it, or you're going to freeze it for later, or you're just going to let it out. If you do just leave it out, you should really consider munching on it and eating it and not letting it sit. And if you're dealing with more fatty meats, again, you want to be able to eat that jerky right away so it's not sitting, because sometimes it's not about safety. If you're like, no, I got my safety measures, they're covered, my bases are covered, then it's about the quality of the taste. So that's what you're going to learn which I hope that you learn. That's one of the goals that we hope you learn, is what you like, what you don't like, and what your family likes, what they don't like, so that you're prepared to really invest into preserving your own meats. So I think that's about it. We're excited for Jocelyn and her future and appreciate her time here. So thank you, everyone. Nagiwa.